Um, Just kind of shifting gears here. A lot of the conversations that we have at Johnson Consulting revolve around the value of one's business and whether they're looking to sell now or later. Knowing the value as a business owner is like essential. And Ryan, you work in the social media space, and we're curious on what your thoughts are on how social media plays into the value of a company's overall value.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways. One being just the brand value itself from a, not necessarily a follower, like we don't put a lot of emphasis on getting likes on a Facebook page. It's more about the engagement and building that audience, and a brand that has great recognition and good rapport with the consumer. Not just we can run an ad and we can get engagement on it, but true authentic fans that are engaging in conversation, and the funeral home's able to get them into the top of the funnel, keep them engaged to the transaction. I think that's hugely valuable. If you're doing the right things on social, you're building brand equity, not only personally, but for the business itself. And then the other being on the pre-need side, the ability to drive pre-need sales super cost effectively. Like, it's massively underpriced attention right now through social. Supply and demand will change that when Facebook runs out of space for ads, and every major brand is dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into the platform. Like, the cost is gonna almost make it impossible for small businesses to play there. So, land grabbing now and grabbing that attention is super valuable, and that attention can equate to pre-need sales. And then I'll let Jake talk on this, but you and I and Jake have had some conversations about the value of that pre-need that's being driven through social ads and social engagement, what that means to the overall value of the business itself. So, I think it's really two-faceted. The funeral home that has the attention gets more of the business. And that's just the way it is across the board, regardless of the profession that you're in. It's why I produce so much content. The more attention we get, the more content we put out, the more leads we get, the more clients we get. It's a pretty simple equation. So the funeral home that's got that social engagement and that brand equity built with that loyal fan base that is engaging, there's a lot of value in that, and being able to ride that through. Because regardless of the people that are in the funeral home, if they sell, that brand equity still carries over, and that new owner's got to do a good job of building that personal brand equity again. But the business brand recognition is there, and there's a loyal base that's ready to follow that.
Absolutely. And Jake, as somebody who deals with business owners selling their business, do you see social media engagement as part of that conversation that's attractive to a potential buyer?
Absolutely. Because it's not that you just call it the social media or the online marketing, but it's the result, and then that result, and that result, which leads to the result of the business value, either at that moment or down the road. And that's an important thing to consider as you look at how you're impacting your most valuable assets. And so, I have presentation I do with slides to show example of a business that's 250 calls and the average sale, and if you can grow 10 more calls or 20 more calls, that impact on value, which is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, it can be depending on the business and your average sale. But then it's not also just about the fact that the social media or that marketing is helping you grow. But what happens if you're not doing that, and you're not only not growing, which we can be blessed to be steady and stable, and that can be okay. But we know that we have average sale changes, but let's say you're not doing that, and so you're not doing this marketing and the social media presence and the pre-need sales and what have you, and so you're losing calls. So let's talk about more of the extreme impact. Because as much as the growth can cause hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional value to your business, the decline does the same thing. And, we don't look at that every day because we're not selling our business every day. I can assure you publicly traded companies consider that not on a daily basis, certainly quarterly or what have you. And so it's something to consider. It's just one piece of the puzzle, if you will, like a key initiative or index, just to make sure the state of your firm is healthy.
No, absolutely. So moving on, how do you see technology playing into the profession to the next 10 years, Ryan? I know Jake in his book talks a lot about the future of the profession, and I would be curious, working in the social media space, what you see happening in the next 10 years regarding technology.
Well, I love what Jake puts emphasis on in the book of just the software and the technology that's available, and how, you know, the consumer outside of our funeral homes or our cemeteries, we're normal consumers. Like, we all have iPhones and smartphones and tablets and Amazon Prime and Netflix and things. But when we get into the funeral home, we like take this normal consumer hat off and put traditional funeral professional hat on, and we like forget about how we engage in the real world. Like, we have to remember that most often we're the consumer that we're marketing to. So the way that we're embracing technology is exactly the same way, you know, other consumers are embracing technology. Unless the funeral home puts emphasis on that, you know, we fall behind. We've got to be able to be accessible 24 hours a day. We have our smartphones on us as consumers 86% of the time. And if you're not reaching that consumer through their front pocket, you're not really reaching them at all. And that's, you know, let's get very basic and look at just website technology. There's still a lot of funeral homes that don't have a website, or if they do have a website, are very archaic. 61% of consumers that are engaging with funeral homes via social media are doing so from a mobile device only, meaning they're mobile only users. They never access Facebook via a desktop or a tablet. So, you know, 61% of those users that are going to a funeral home website are having bad experiences. That's not a good thing for that funeral home. So I think technology plays a big role in that regard. And then, as well as, you know, when I look at the technology that Johnson has created and what you guys have done with Performance Tracker, like being able to analyze every single aspect of your business is an advantage 100%. You know, we're a very analytic driven company, and we make calculated moves based on the data that we can pull. And when you can do that, you can hedge what's going to be successful and what's not going to be successful, which absolutely allows you to spend less in just trying something, and keeps profitability higher because you can hedge on what's going to work and what's not going to work, and you know how to approach it. So, you know, I think that focuses on running the business there. But, you know, I say a lot of times in my presentations when I speak that, you know, if you hate the technology that's available in the profession now, then you might as well exit, because it's only going to get worse over the next 10 years. I saw an article yesterday online where there's a company that has created the ability to record somebody and then allow you to interact with them through artificial intelligence after they're gone. So can you imagine being able to virtually attend a funeral through augmented reality, or virtually sitting in your home with a pair of goggles on, being able to slide caskets in, being able to place an urn on a table and see exactly what it's going to look like in the cemetery, exactly what that setup's going to look like in the funeral home, or virtually attending a funeral. Let's take it past live streaming, which is wonderful, great. But what if I was able to virtually attend that funeral? You know, I can throw on my Oculus Rift from Facebook goggles, and I can go attend a YouTube concert or the World Cup or any other major sporting event for free. And like, I'm almost there in person. I can't high five the person next to me, but other than that, I'm right in the front row and I'm engaging. So, you know, that technology will apply itself to the funeral space, whether we in the profession want it to happen or not, because the consumer demands it, and it's infiltrated every other facet of their life. Death care is not going to be untouched by technology just because we're resistant to it. The consumer is going to make it a priority for us. And if we don't offer it, they're going to go elsewhere and get it. Somebody will. So we've got to embrace and evolve. And I think Jake makes a lot of those good points in his book on just the software side of things and technology. Like, we've just scratched the surface. And if you hate it now, you're going to really despise it over the next 10 years.
Absolutely. And
And Marissa,
Jake,
if you go to Black Mirror episode "Be Right Back," you can watch Ryan's what Ryan's talking about the afterlife of Avatar. It's kind of an interesting episode.
yeah, no, absolutely. I'll have to check that one out. Jake, as you know, you've seen Performance Tracker develop into what it is. How important is analyzing that data going to be in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's well, first of all, very important. The reason being is we think we know what people want. We think we know what makes them happy. We think we've done a good job. We think because they haven't reached back to us that everything was okay. And I don't know if it's a little bit of my OCD that I have, or just the fact that I don't like assuming anything. But I think having that data directly from those people that came and getting their feedback and adopting to things that they say would have made the funeral more meaningful, or seeing what trends are between one ranger to the next, or comparing yourself to other locations. I mean, who wouldn't want that data? It's the whole reason we did it, and it's extremely valuable. And it absolutely, just through the data, without any predictions, I can look at that here in Arizona and can pick a funeral home in Georgia or Kansas or somewhere, a funeral home I've never been to, and I can tell you who the best performing arrangers are and who are not, who has the better average, who's collecting the money, who makes the family feel more comfortable.
Yep.
And all that through data. And we know that Ryan mentioned to it well, but data is such a huge thing anymore. We wonder why some of these software companies can have such value with little profitability. It's because of all that valuable data that they have and as users and the information that they're gathering. So we've done that through our Performance Tracker software and gathering the sales data and coupling that with the customer service metrics and benchmarking, and you put that all together and you really get some valuable information.
No, absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, Jake, you talk about how building a staff you can trust is one of your most valuable assets. How do funeral and cemetery professionals continue to attract and keep great talent? Jake, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. If you ask, what keeps funeral homeowners up at night, it'd be profitability, cremation, and help. It's hard to find good help out there, and the help that you find, they have, we're talking about a profession that's, as Ryan had mentioned earlier, it's 24/7, right? I mean, you don't know when somebody's going to die, and you're dealing with death every day, and it takes a special person. And so, I would say that some, if not many, of the states have made it a little more difficult than it should be on how that's done. And I can reflect on myself when I had a year where I did over 200 funeral arrangements and managed a funeral home, and we did customer surveying, and I did well. I mean, I had good marks, and this is coming from somebody that my background is in financial analysis and in accounting, but I also know how to talk to people, and I know how to listen. And listen to understand, not listen to respond. And so finding those right people, taking care of them, pay them well, for God's sakes. The one benchmark that I definitely have seen since doing this starting in the mid 90s is that that labor cost has gone up, and it should. They're valuable people. It's a service that we're providing. Everything else is secondary. And so finding the right talent is about a couple things. It's about always looking, even when you're not hiring. It's a practice that we do at our consulting firm. It's a practice we do at my own funeral home. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a space for them, but just what if you came across a person that just kind of blew you away? My challenge to anybody that's an owner or a manager is how are you constantly evaluating who you have and looking at what's out there and how people are thinking. And if you find that person that's just blows you away, how can you work to find a place for that person? And if you do, internalize with yourself, like, how can that person help this company go to the next level? And I think it's hard, and I'm guilty of it as well. You find great people and then you feel bad. You feel like there's no way you're going to make that change. That's a difficult change. I'm a nice person. I don't want to, I don't want to do that. But it just, and if you're fortunate enough, you have found the right people. But just in case, you just should always be looking, because somebody may come across, your desk, or you find something that's somebody that's really can help you and can put you in that avenue towards growth, whether they know other people in the community or they just think differently, because it's all about what can you do, what is the most valuable thing that you should be doing, what's the most valuable thing that your manager should be doing, what is the most valuable thing that your ranger should be doing, and what are the things that you, your manager, your rangers are doing that they should not be doing, and give it to somebody else or stop doing it if the customer's not seeing value. I think every owner needs to look at themselves and say, because they never look at themselves this way, because they, we all as owners kind of figure out, what's my tax person say my salary should be, so that's okay, and then anything else is a distribution. But if you really want to consider yourself as $1,000 an hour paid person, if you were paying somebody that much money, what the heck would you be asking them to do? Would you be asking them to review death certificates in the morning, or run death certificates, or would you be having them go out and try to grow business and meet people in the community and empower your staff and always be thinking, being a resource to them instead of micromanaging, if you will? I think if we all look at that a little differently, we'll find more capacity in our day to do the things we want to do and grow our business. So those are my comments on that as it relates to, people and the value within the organization.
No, absolutely. Those are great thoughts. And I mean, Ryan, so much of what you do is built on relationships and, even like company culture. So how do you see, company culture and relationships kind of playing a factor into building a staff that you can trust?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, like Jake said. Culture is something in our company that we speak on, and just it's at the core of what we do. And I think we all have different definitions of culture. And for me, it was no rules, flexible work hours, like the ultimate freedom. And what I have learned now is going from, one employee and myself, and then now a staff of almost 30, is, culture is really defined by boundaries. And when you can set the right boundaries, people can operate freely within those boundaries, and it really gives them more freedom. But I get the fortunate to talk at a lot of mortuary schools to the next generation that's coming into the profession. And then as we talk to our clients that, that are funeral home owners now, millennials get a really bad rap. And, our entire staff are millennials. So, looking at what really drives a millennial, I think it's going to require funeral homes to start thinking about operations a little bit differently, and looking at benefits packages differently. And there's this level of fear that if I pour myself into a younger funeral director and I give them freedom, that they're just going to leave and they're going to take that somewhere else, and it's going to be a waste of my time. It's going to be a waste of my money. And there's an element of truth to that, but I think there's a fine line of giving enough that you keep somebody happy and you don't use them, versus giving them all the freedom in the world and they walk all over you. Like there's a fine line in between there. And what we found with millennials is when you give them a purpose, right? It's not always about more money. We've had to get creative with our benefits packages where they can earn work from home days and, do personal development at work. You can earn a work from home day. Passionate about a charity, great. You get paid one day a year that you can go volunteer at any charity that you want to. Like abstractly think about what makes employees tick and where their passions are at, and how can you have a part in that not only keeps them happy, it's not costing you anymore, but the level of your culture and the way that we treat each other is super key. And really focusing, you said relationships, like inside of your business, one person can be absolutely toxic to the group. So being able to keep relationships where they should be and focusing on that, that's where we spend a lot of our time is on training of how to be a good coworker, how to treat people, how to problem solve different personality types, and how do you approach, how do you, a customer service person may approach a graphic design person differently than they would approach, an analyst. And the same in a funeral home. Funeral directors tick different than someone that's the dominant embalmer. And how do you approach that person with healthy conflict and make sure things get resolved? So, I look at it a little bit differently. Jake has a much higher level, more management, advice, and I'm a little bit more like, hey, this is how we speak to millennials and how we can, that's the future, and being able to welcome them into a business and allowing them freedom, at the same time being able to pour into them the knowledge that we have, and know that, if we do the right things, they're going to stay for a long time. I think that's super key in the future growth of funeral homes.
Absolutely. No, there was some great conversation there. I want to kind of go back to the technology impact aspect of our conversation. Jake's chapter 6 is called "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger: Embracing Technology in a Slow to Change Profession." So, Ryan, how do you approach a business who kind of doesn't understand the value of social media or understand why they need it today?
Oh, that's tough. Like, it's a very hard conversation to have. And it's a conversation I've been having with funeral homes for 9.5 years. And it feels like every day we haven't got any further than we had 9 years ago. So, the best job that we do when we can connect dots to things that matter to them. So when we can break things down and relate it to everyday business. For example, when we're trying to get them to embrace social, and we can show demographics of who's engaging on social, and reports that show that the 65 plus demographic is the fastest growing demographic on Facebook. That's the ideal consumer for a funeral home. We can draw points that 75% of price shoppers and people making arrangements are women over the age of 45, and then go, okay, people over the age of 45, 75% of them are engaged on social on a daily basis. So essentially, if we took 75% of the community that were over the age of 45, put them on the front lawn of your funeral home, would you ever walk out the door, walk around them, and go search for the 25% that didn't show up? Obviously, oh, absolutely not. I would take the time to shake hands. Great. That's what you're not doing by not being involved in social. Right. You're spending a lot of money marketing wise trying to reach 25% of the audience that may not be on Facebook, when 75% of the audience is there 5 times a day for an average of 33 minutes. And there's virtually no competition in terms of other funeral homes engaging them in conversation. So the ability to land grab and capture that attention is huge. So when we can break it down, it makes it a little bit easier. But, at the end of the day, we've gotten very romantic about what used to work. And that's, it just isn't, specific to the funeral profession. Every profession deals with that. When you have an older owner, and we understand how things used to work. And I think fear keeps us from embracing technology. I bought the business from my dad or grandfather, and I'm still feeding the same number of families out of the business that they were. If I make a tweak and call volume goes down, then I'm at fault. But if I don't do anything, keep everything the same, then it's just the market's fault, and I'm not at risk of blame. So I think fear keeps us from embracing technology. But at some point, we got to realize that if we use the technology and its intent into our advantage, one, it's going to make us more efficient as business operators and owners. It's going to allow our staff to be more efficient in the relationships that they build, which ultimately is going to bring more call volume and market share into the funeral home. So, it's a hard conversation to approach, but we do our best job at breaking it down to its simplest form of, if you could have a conversation with 75% of your community over the age of 45, right inside your funeral home, would you ever pass that opportunity up? No. Great. Stop spending 95% of your marketing budget on 25% of the audience that isn't there.
No, absolutely. And Jake, just being, seeing all the clients that you've had at Johnson Consulting over the years, and also being a funeral home owner yourself, how have you seen, technology shift and really make an impact on funeral homes and cemeteries.
It's interesting. Back in, I've always I think Ryan and I share a similar trait that I think we're always thinking of, like, what's the next thing it could do, or what's the next thing out there, or how do we stay ahead of all this? And so I would say it was probably 1997. I just figured how can I didn't know where to find the resources for development of software at the time, but I knew that, this was, I think even back then they were talking about smart devices, the future of smart devices in homes and things like that. And so here we are today, and it keeps evolving. I think that we'll continue to see, I kind of answer it this way. I think we're going to continue, I know we'll continue to see new software being offered out in our space. I think my opinion is that in general, it will be fragmented at the moment. And the reason I say that is that I think it's oftentimes missed on the fact that it is a niche, but it is a small niche. And if you break down the numbers and you start with the number of deaths, let's say it's 2.7 million deaths or 2.4, whatever the number is, we have to keep in mind that 35% of those customers have already probably written a pre-need, and so they know where they're going in general. And then you've probably got another 20 to 35% or 40 that know Jake Johnson owns a funeral home over in Sun City, or they know Sean Murphy that owns Whitney Murphy Funeral Home, and they're going to go see them. They might peek though at what's online and whatever, but they have a level of trust. And so call it the 25, anywhere from 20 to 30% out there that are searching online, but I know which part of the three segments are growing. Oops, getting a little feedback there. I know which part of those three segments are growing. It's the ones that are peeking online and that want software to help them make decisions. Because, I reflect back on the fact that whether we, like it or not, the fact of the matter is our customers happen to be one of the few customers out there. Probably the same goes for tax customers and people going to jail, but nobody wants to go there. They'd rather be spending their time somewhere else, but they have to go there. And, I often reflect on Todd Van Beck, who's been in our space a long time, that says, hey, look, there's a problem that they have and they're asking you to solve it. And those problems that consumers today are able to solve involve going online to solve them. And, you can buy a car, you can get a loan, you can do hundreds of thousands of dollars transactions and never see a person. And so it's just obvious that it's going to end that way here. And I think the good news is that, I look at my children who are 17 and 15, and the way they interact and navigate through social media, or not even, if you will. I mean, there's just all these different segments, and to Ryan's point is, are you just going to push this segment aside because you want to go after that segment? I mean, you kind of got to be touching and feeling everywhere out there. And my point was going to be that we know, as we see Instagram influencers out there, that people are saying, I want that, or that's how I want to be, or the latest in fashion or whatever. And so I was on a ride yesterday coming back from my funeral home. We were doing a strategic planning session, and I was looking at Jeff Casey in our office, and I'm saying, I wish I could say this is absolutely going to happen, but I'm curious about the shift of the people that come to our funeral homes in the future and cemeteries, and whether it's almost like everything else in life, which is like a one-upsmanship right now. You kind of wonder if that'll happen at the funeral business in the future, and that you'll have like a resurgence of the value of ceremony, and that just like people are doing within weddings. But we know that software is going to be a big part of it, and there's a lot out there to sift through. And, that's why you got people like Ryan and Disrupt Media and others that are sitting in that space every day, trying to navigate through it and find the best avenue to find your customers. So.
No, absolutely. Jake, you released this book right before the start of a new decade. It was actually very great timing, I believe, for this. So if you could summarize kind of like the key aspects of your book, what is it going to take to stay alive in the funeral and cemetery profession in this next decade? What's going to be different this decade as opposed to the last one?
Yep, I think it's embracing change, seeing that as opportunity, utilizing software, going to the online market and social media, finding those customers in different places, being different, and knowing that, Ryan has done a great job of that with his own company. You might start off uncomfortable or stand out, but that's exactly what the good result ends up being at the end is people look at you as somebody that looks at this perspective a little different. So finding good people, for God's sakes, I mean, understanding where your value lies and giving the rest of those duties to the next person and finding good help. It seems to be a very common theme with anybody I talk to that has successful companies, that they have found good people, they take care of them, and they help them grow and lead the company, and the leader gets out of the way and helps do strategy. And so if we do that and we change our conversations when we go to meet with our buddies, our other funeral home owners and managers, instead of talking about best practices, we talk about how we can grow and what we're doing about it and how each decision we're doing impacts and is of value for the business, and talk about how we're developing the people under us. Then I think I know that if I was your competitor and you were doing all that, I think I would move to a different market. I mean, those are strong things doing, and that's how you're going to be successful in the future.
Absolutely. And Ryan, what are successful death care business owners doing to evolve in 2020, in your opinion?
Echo a lot of what Jake said, but embracing where the consumer's attention is, because funeral homes have to be a part of the equation and the conversation. And if we sit back and continue to do what we've always done, it's not there. I mean, there are groups online of 100 million people that are discussing death-related topics, and nobody in the funeral profession is represented there. So you've got to go where the attention is at. And I often tell our customers a lot, like if Facebook goes away tomorrow, it doesn't affect us one bit at all, because the 2.6 billion people that use the platform every month are going to go somewhere else. And I'll come back and say, guess what? Yesterday you should have been Facebook. Now today you should be on XYZ, because that's where everyone's at. So going where that attention is and being a part of the conversation. But at the end of the day, and Jake covers this in his book, technology will never replace the value of a handshake or face-to-face. We're inherently built as human beings to need interaction, and technology will never solely replace that. So funeral homes continually doing things in the local market, being involved in charities, being in situations where they can handshake and be face-to-face is absolutely key to a strong business, and growing that market share through relationships. 80% of funeral home business is relationship driven, yet we rarely talk about how to build relationships through what we're doing in the funeral home outside of serving the family. So we've got to learn better how to build relationships, whether that's online or offline, to be able to drive those relationships and secure future business. I think the other thing too, like one of the practicalities of the book, I believe it was chapter 9, the Johnson Consulting success metric. Is that what it was called? Yes. So it's like a checklist of evaluating different aspects of your business. If you can go through that checklist, as I read through all of those check boxes and that matrix and look at the description of and how you define them. If you go through that and you're lacking in one area, great. You need to put some focus there, because every single one of those were practical, like just business things that every funeral home or cemetery should be doing and should be evaluating and should know about. So to survive, it's going to require that we're just better business people in general, or we're bringing people on board and partnering with companies like Johnson that are good business people, because at the end of the day, not every funeral home owner is a great business person. Like, we've inherited businesses inherently became owners by default. And I think, again, in the book, Jake draws great kind of connection points to a great employee doesn't mean they're going to be a great manager, and a great manager doesn't mean they're going to be a great owner, and a son or daughter doesn't mean that they're going to be a great owner just because they're in the family. Like,
Right.
evaluating that and aligning with the right people to make your business stronger will be absolutely key for survival. And, you know, Jake doesn't know it all. I don't know it all as a business owner. Jake's a part of groups of other people that bring him insight. Every Thursday morning, I'm a part of an entrepreneur group where we get online and we Zoom call, and we, you know, I learn things about how to run a business from somebody that owns a catering company or is a pastor of a church. Like, we've got to surround ourselves with people that can elevate us and get outside our comfort zone and engage with other business owners, because they're going after the same consumer we are, and other industries are having great success engaging those consumers. How do we apply those tactics in our business and go outside of the normal ways that we engage? And we can learn a lot when we kind of open our ears and listen, and be a little bit humble and know that we don't know everything there is to know. And there's things that are happening in other professions that absolutely apply to the death care space, simply because the consumer is the common denominator across the board, and being able to engage them and bring on those tactics that other professions have used.
Absolutely. That's great perspective, Ryan. I think that's an excellent place to wrap this up. Thank you both for your time. Thank you, everybody who's on listening and has been joining us for this discussion. It was just a really good time of learning and reflecting on where we're going this next decade. If you are listening and you would like a copy of Jake's book, please email us at info@johnsonconsulting.com. This webinar will be available on YouTube in the next coming week, so please subscribe to Johnson Consulting's YouTube channel if you would like to listen again. And make sure you're following us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook for any other future upcoming webinar announcements. Thank you both again. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Go buy the book.
Bye-bye. See ya. And watch that Black Mirror episode.
That's right. That's right.
All
Have
right.
a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.